Welcome to the very first episode of the SafePodcast. I'm your host, Jamie Teilmann, and I'm thrilled to have you join me today as we dive into the world of governance in the digital age. If you've ever wondered what digital governance really means or why it's essential in today's fast-paced, tech-driven world, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about making complex governance concepts simple, actionable, and relevant for leaders, innovators, or anyone facing the challenges of digital life. Today's episode of the SafePodcast is about digital governance and why it matters. And to help us unpack this critical topic, I'm joined by a true expert in the field, Adil Khan, the CEO of SafePaaS, who's been on the forefront of governance and innovation since the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And he's guided numerous organizations in rethinking their approach to governance in the digital era. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here, and I can't wait to dive into this conversation.
Hey, Jamie.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So what exactly is digital governance, and how is digital transformation changing the way that organizations approach it?
Yeah, that's a great way to start, Jamie. So, as you just said, I've been in the governance business for most of my life, serving on a board of a public company and CEO. And then over the last 25 years, helping other public companies with their governance needs. So as you think about governance, what we really think of is a system of policies, practices, and processes that help organizations achieve their mission. So clearly, it's a very foundation of the capital system on how we generate wealth. In the last 2 years, and I would say a decade, you've seen a digital transformation that has happened from doing things offline to all our lives, our business, our work being online. And so it has upended the traditional concept of governance, which was, really limited to boardrooms and a few executives, to now rank and files. And that's where businesses are gaining a lot of speed and velocity in addressing market needs by moving faster, operating in global environments, responding to complex threats, as well as technology and enhancements and improvements. The traditional approach to governance, which was more reactive, it was a periodic review of your policies, procedures, and outcomes, is become more dynamic and more real time. And so
Right.
that's how I would define the transformation today.
So that's where active governance comes in. Can you explain how active governance works and what it is in your opinion?
Yeah, it sort of ties into the current theme that we live in the business world. We are constantly connected to our devices and we're operating on a 24/7 model. And so exactly the active governance, what that means is being able to embed these advanced controls throughout your digital platform for real-time monitoring to identify fast-moving threats that impact the business in a proactive way, right? For
Hmm.
example, if one of our clients had an automated purchasing process that had exceeded the credit limit across different markets.
Right.
So, for example, recently we had a client that was concerned about credit limits for their customers using multiple systems across the globe. And what active governance is able to do for them is look across all their systems that are customer facing, their CRM systems, their customer order processing systems, and analyze that in real time and identify credit limits dynamically to ensure that any credit risk, for example, can be prevented and therefore reducing or eliminating financial losses of credit risk.
Right. That's really interesting and emphasizes how active governance can improve decision making. Um, but how do you ensure, or how do you help organizations ensure that governance policies stay relevant as business needs change?
Jimmy, what I would suggest is to look at active governance as continuous assessment of your risks. You're constantly evaluating threats in terms of likelihood, impact, and velocity of those threats or risk, for example.
Mhm.
And so what organizations need to do today is evaluate these risks against their policies and postures and align them, leveraging the new technologies and strategy and ensure they're aligned with their strategies. So active governance makes it easier because it embeds the controls within each of these systems. So those risks can be evaluated in real time. And it adapts and changes with your business. So make sure your business remains agile.
And what would you say is one of the areas that needs evaluation and maybe some tweaking most often? Would that be in your pay to pay cycle, or where do you see that?
That's a great point. Today we're facing, as we do this podcast, we're facing, some executives would call that a whiplash with trade wars coming at the forefront of the market. We're seeing that in the stock market. We're seeing in the stock prices of many of our clients' results. What we see today is the supply chain being reconfigured, whether it's onshoring, offshoring, something in between. So that's the critical area we're very focused on and helping our clients that have international presence and impact, whether it's customers or supply chain.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's talk about how digital transformation has impacted the need for stronger governance practices. What are you seeing in your work with customers?
So what we're seeing as we talk to our customers, that digital transformation has accelerated decision making. It's accelerated our innovation cycles, how quickly we're getting to the market from an idea to market. Even the risks like cyber threats and compliance issues have become more frequent. Things are changing with AI as an example. We're seeing new ways on how vulnerabilities are getting exploited. So that means the business needs to have strong governance framework to manage these rapid changes by staying
hmm
compliant with evolving regulations.
That sounds like a tough balance to strike. How do organizations juggle rapid innovation with the need for strong controls?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It can be a tough challenge, and we hear that from our customers often. I think the one way to do that is to ensure, as I said previously, to ensure governance as part of doing business, right? So what I mean by that is embedding governance and controls into the process. The policies, which are rule based, are embedded within how you operate the business. That's the only way you can really survive and thrive in this market. So what I mean by that is an example. If you're developing a new product or a service, you should consider including a review of the security, how that product's going to leverage data and security around protecting your customer, your own intellectual property, your trade secrets. And that's one way how customers can embed governance into the process to achieve that active governance we just talked about.
Right. Well, this brings us to an important distinction that often confuses people. So there's governance versus compliance. Can you help us break this down and let us know in, I guess, maybe more broader terms, what's the difference between governance versus compliance? How are the two different?
That's a common competing priority in an organization. Governance is broader. It's a superset of compliance. Compliance is a component of governance in our minds, the way we approach market and solutions at SafePaaS. And the reason we bring governance as a umbrella or the top priority for us is not just because that's how the enterprise is structured today, from the board down to the rank and file employees, with executive management being responsible for the execution of the business. It's also because there's higher value to the business by focusing on governance. And if you focus well on governance, compliance will fall in place automatically, which is really limited to your regulatory environment that you operate in. And those vary based on which regions you're in and the administration that you're operating under. However, if you focus on governance, you will not only get compliance right, but you will also get a higher return on investment for the efforts you put in to improve your internal controls to comply with your policies and procedures.
Right. That's a great point. So, how do you make sure that your governance framework aligns with your compliance requirements?
So the trick is, in my mind, is to start with a unified framework that integrates those key compliance elements into your overall framework. Yeah. without making you too restrictive. And you have to dial that up or down depending on your mission, your strategy as a company. For example, in today's environment, one thing that our clients are really concerned about is data protection. So being able to embed, the data protection elements around data privacy and regulations, not only from a compliance perspective, such as GDPR, if you're doing business in Europe, as an example, or in California, CCPA, but also, protecting your customers' assets, their data, because that's good for you, right? People will trust you more, they'll do business. So that's a great example of where governance and compliance work together.
Have you seen examples where strong governance has directly influenced compliance outcomes?
Absolutely. I get success stories from our teams almost on a weekly basis as we service the market, not only in the US, but across all major economic regions. One of the clients recently reported that by using this active data protection that we talked about, their overall governance strategy, not only are they able to comply with the principles of GDPR, but also have they been able to promote that as a differentiator to build more confidence and trust with their customers. And that's where I'm seeing a trend. Customers are asking a lot more questions about data with all the news in the market, whether it's onboarding a new customer or an existing customer. Having that confidence really helps you win business.
Let's shift gears and talk about what organizations actually need to govern their digital enterprises and what are key capabilities to help them do that.
There are several effective oversight mechanisms, right? For example, real-time monitoring tools that have come to market. I know we have a whole set of those at SafePaaS. Enhanced decision-making capabilities, so better insight, whether you can, find what I call needle in the haystack. And that's where the risk is. Usually it's that hidden risk that gets you. The obvious stuff, that we know about, we outsource to an insurance provider or we manage it through internal controls. So that's an area where, we're seeing oversight mechanisms come into the picture. Building stakeholder trust is essential. Leveraging technologies such as the ones we see a lot of our customers adopt around access governance solutions to streamline overall identity lifecycle management.
Okay. And what about organizations with limited resources? How would you advise them to prioritize developing these capabilities?
Yes, the good news is there are pretty well-defined frameworks and best practices that have been in place way before even digital was a factor. And we call that a top-down approach. So you start with your high risk based on impact and likelihood and velocity of the risk, for example. There are many other characteristics. I'm just simplifying it for this podcast. And one of the things that we see that bubble up in most cases is access controls, which is where we're spending a lot of our R&D efforts to ensure that access to sensitive data and capabilities within the enterprise is protected first. That's an initial or first line of defense. And so that's an example of where you can start right away.
And looking ahead, what emerging technologies or trends do you think will shape digital governance in the future?
Well, we're all excited about AI. We read about it every day. And consumer AI has really taken on with OpenAI, ChatGPT. But what I'm excited about and where customers are inquiring us to focus on is solutions around enterprise AI. And we're going to be at a Oracle conference next week. We'll be making a big announcement about our contribution to the market around AI. We're pretty excited about the ability that AI brings and plays a key role in detecting risks and also helping businesses, control owners specifically make decisions around it. A blockchain, it's been experimented with in many different use cases. We think of blockchain as Bitcoin, but it's much bigger than that. It's also a great framework to gather evidence that is reliable, that your external auditors can trust better. We see new technologies coming in, and that's the trends I would suggest our listeners to focus on.
Yeah, actually, you hit the nail on the head. I immediately think of cryptocurrency when I hear Bitcoin. Maybe we'll have to have a conversation about that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Adil, this has been such an insightful conversation. I want to thank you for sharing your expertise. Look, let me start again. Adil, this has been such an insightful conversation. I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us. And it's clear that strong digital governance isn't just about meeting regulatory requirements. It's about driving innovation, building trust, and ensuring long-term success for businesses in a fast-paced world. For everyone listening today, I hope this episode gave you a better understanding of why digital governance matters, and not just for businesses, but for all of us as we try to find our way through this digital age we find ourselves in. And next time on the Safe Podcast, we'll be tackling another hot topic: how to rein in SaaS sprawl, so you won't want to miss it. Until then, stay informed and stay safe.
Thank you.